Well, let me ask you first, the number of official fatalities has more than doubled in the last 48 hours. What is that now? Have you got to all points of the island?
Yes, well, thank you for the opportunity. And regarding the official death toll, we did have an increase. We are at 34. I should state that many of those deaths did occur during the storm. They were just not identified, and they were not certified yet. So it's not something that's occurring necessarily post-storm, although there are some that have. But we sort of have been stuck at 16 for a couple of days, and we did an effort to make sure that we could get the most recent data certified, and now the death toll is at about 34.
President Trump, I have to come back to this, made a big statement last night when he told Fox News that something would have to be done about your debt. I'm sure that came as a great relief to you when you heard it, if you weren't a little bit maybe questioning of it. Did the president say anything to you directly about your debt?
Well, we didn't speak about the debt. Well, I was mostly talking to him about, the hurricane and the storm-related disaster and the efforts that we needed. Efforts we needed in healthcare, efforts that we needed for supplemental aid in CDBG and housing. The magnitude of the disaster which is now estimated at over $90 billion in Puerto Rico. But I did listen to his comments. And of course, that's the president's opinion. With respect to that, the government of Puerto Rico is currently in a Title III proceeding. So I really can't comment on any of that.
Well, the president is known for being able to do deals, and he did say that very explicitly. Do you have any hopes that the president might be able to step in and do something about this?
About what, the debt itself?
$74 billion of debt plus whatever you end up incurring now.
Well, really, my focus right now is to make sure that all of the assets and resources that we need to get through the emergency and start the rebuilding process in Puerto Rico are in place. So, the president has been very helpful in those administrative decisions. Every time we've asked him for something, they have delivered. But it also has to go and transcend now to Congress, where, an aid package will be developed. And there's been a lot of support, bipartisan support, for us to get this package going, that it's one that's sustainable, has the necessary funding for Puerto Rico to recover and rebuild, and that's really my focus right now. I'm not really focused on debt issues right now.
Let's talk about that aid for a moment. OMB Director Mick Mulvaney says it's not going to be a bailout, but they are working on a package which would be about $29 billion. But that includes also aid for Harvey and Irma, and even some aid for Western wildfires. It doesn't seem like it would be enough for Puerto Rico to recover, given the estimates of tens of billions of dollars necessary. How much do you need from Congress?
Well, the way Congress does this is that they put some initial money out so that all of these operations can start being executed. So in the onset, we feel that we're going to need the down payment of about $10 to $15 billion. Of course, again, the damages are much more extensive, as were in Harvey. I think that Harvey were an estimated $100 billion. Irma were an estimated, at least in Florida, $45 billion. And of course, the Virgin Islands and have significant damage of their own. So I don't think that what Director Mulvaney is talking about is the whole package, but rather the initial monies that will be put forth so that we can get things started. And I would agree, this is not a bailout. This is an emergency situation, and there's capital that needs to be put forth. When I've been 8 months within the administration, and I had already implemented significant fiscal constraint. We reduced the budget by $1.4 billion here in Puerto Rico. So I am cognizant of that, but certainly cognizant that this is a different scenario in Puerto Rico right now, an emergency scenario, and full support needs to be given.
Well, on that note, Governor, it's impossible to collect taxes right now. It's impossible to collect sales taxes. We were speaking to a bondholder earlier who asked if the burden of the debt repayments, the debt servicing, hasn't really shifted to Main Street as opposed to Wall Street, given that so much of the debt is held by investors that depend on sales taxes.
Right. Well, this is a reality, and it's something that we're looking at. The reality is, in Puerto Rico, we're not going to have much revenues in the coming months while we restore, basic infrastructure for communication, for establishing internet, while we can get to all of the, the different private sector settings. It's going to be hard to get resources flowing. So this is part of our argument, not only recognizing that there was a natural disaster here in Puerto Rico, but that based on the, fiscal fragility that we had, in order for us to operate, some considerations need to be taken in terms of how we're going to get revenues, how long that's going to take, what do we need to mitigate that action. So right now, a lot of our efforts are being directed to sort of laying out what that path is and looking for alternatives.
Of course. Well, in the last few years, maybe about 10% of the population has migrated. Have you any estimates for what Maria might cause in terms of migration in the very near term, which would again impact the viability of the economy?
Right. This is a major concern. It is one that I have voiced and that I've stated that if we want to avoid a humanitarian crisis in Puerto Rico and in the United States, and if we want to avoid, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Puerto Ricans flocking to the United States, because all we need to do is jump on a plane, then we need to take serious action to have all the resources here in Puerto Rico, make sure that the services can come online as soon as possible, and that we can rebuild stronger than ever. If that doesn't happen, then I am afraid that the exodus that had already been a significant tear to our economy would just increase exponentially, creating a demographic problem in Puerto Rico, but also one in the contiguous United States.
Well, Governor, you'll need to regain access to capital markets eventually. How do you anticipate being able to do that now, particularly with this question of the debt burden hanging over you? And obviously, you're not waiting for President Trump to do something. You don't fully believe that the president can do anything.
Well, again, access to the markets is important. It always has been important for us. It always has been a consideration. That's why we wanted to be transparent, have Title VI negotiations and have discussions to see what the path forward is. But however, I must reiterate that this is a brand new scenario. It is one where there has been major catastrophic disaster here in Puerto Rico. It is one where we're going to need to rebuild, to get the resources appropriate to rebuild, and based on that, restart our normal way of functioning and essentially our economy and so forth. So until we can iron out what the initial conditions for the rebuilding process are going to be, it really doesn't beg to discuss what the conditions of opening to the markets are, because we already have the closure to the markets